Hi, and welcome to this AI in C# video about using ChatGPT 5, in this case in semantic kernel. And the reason for this is that this is actually a kind of different model. If you just come from ChatGPT 4.0, which was a non-reasoning model, this is actually a reasoning model by default and works a little more like the O3 model, the O4 model, and so on. So there is some subtle differences you need to be aware of when switching. Overall, if you haven't done any tweaking, it will actually just work. But a few things to be aware of. The first one is that the API do not use the model router that ChatGPT.com have. You might have noticed that sometimes if you ask it a hard question, it will actually think longer, while you ask it an easy question, it will not think longer. The APIs are not like that. You are in control by default, and will remain in control because there is no router at all. So if you want it to think, it will think every single time. If you want it not to think too long, you will need to set some changes. There are four models behind the scenes of ChatGPT to choose from. There's the GPT-5, the GPT-5 Mini, the Nano version, and then there's a special one called GPT-5 Chat. The last one is kind of funky because it's actually not a thinking model. It's more like ChatGPT 4, but it's also limited in other ways. For example, it can't do function calling for some reason, like ChatGPT 4 could. So I'm not really sure who should ever use that model. So in this video, we are mostly focusing on the three new thinking models. And because they are thinking models, or reasoning models, same word, you can set the temperature. So normally I have shown a lot of videos where I set the temperature to 0. If you do that in ChatGPT 5, you will actually get an error message saying you cannot change the temperature to other than 1. So if you have said that and just change the deployment name, you would end up with an error message when you used it. And this is again because of this thinking reasoning. And one thing that caught me by surprise is actually that reasoning is on by default, and you actually can't turn it off. We will see some code in just a second about how to do something with this and actually how OpenAI recommend you do if you're just switching from a non-reasoning model to a reasoning model. Final thing, there's a lot of the things that are not exposed in semantic kernel, and it's not really their fault because the underlying OpenAI NuGet package has not exposed these at all. So I will talk about them, but I won't be able to show them until they're actually supported by the OpenAI NuGet package. And based on history, that package is often quite far behind in capabilities, but that's the way it is. And they are not too important features. But let's go into some code. And if you've seen any of my other videos about creating a kernel, creating an agent, and making a chat loop, this is much the same. So I have my configurations behind the scenes in some user secrets, and here I choose my model deployment name. And as I mentioned, there are 4 options. I'm using the Mini here, but these 3 works exactly the same way, just how fast they are and how clever they are behind the scenes, just like for ChatGPT 4 versus ChatGPT 4 Mini. And it's set up exactly the same way as before, and we built our kernel. In our agents, we can of course set the various settings, and as I mentioned, if we set the temperature to 0 and use GPT-4 Mini, we will be able to compile the code. But let me get it here. When we try to ask something, hello, we get an error message saying the temperature does not support 0. And it needs to be default value 1 or not set at all, so it is the default. So if you have this, get rid of it. It's not needed anymore. Then there's reasoning effort. You might not have any reasoning effort like this because you came from a non-reasoning model. But if you don't set the reasoning effort, it will actually be default medium, which caught me by surprise. I would have imagined that if I didn't set any reasoning effort, it would not do anything reasoning. But if I have it like this and run the code, if I say hello and I have put in down here that I'm also showing the reasoning tokens, because the reasoning is always part of the output of your reasoning. So the input is the actual input, but if it just gives you one word back, some of the output tokens would be higher, and that's because some of them have been used for reasoning. Sometimes reasoning is so trivial that it doesn't use any. Normally in hello it doesn't use any, so you can see it had output of 20 and 0 was used for reasoning. But we can ask, why is the sky blue? This is a bit tougher question, so we'll actually do some reasoning on it. And we can see that it actually used 384 was for reasoning. So this is quite a lot actually. So if you want to have the cheapest way of doing this, you need to actually go in and set this to low. And this is also the migration guidelines that OpenAI have, that if you go from 4, you should go in and set it to low. They actually also have something called minimal in the raw API, but that's not exposed yet in the NuGet package. So the best we can do for now is set it to low. We can't set it to none or empty string or anything, but if we set it to low and try to ask, last time we used 300, so why is the sky blue? We will see in a minute that it now used 0 reasoning. Normally when I set it to low, it will go to around 0 reasoning, but if you don't set anything, it will actually use more than you might expect. So setting reasoning effort equals low is probably something you want to do if you're doing some cost efficient things. And this is something that really surprised me, that this is actually not equal low, but it's actually equal medium if we just have no setting. We can, of course, set it to high as well if we really want to use, and that's exactly the same as when you use the O3 Mini, for example. Set it to high in order to have it the most reasoning effort, and it will use more. Of course, this is a trivial question. It will not use anymore, but that is depending on the question, of course. So this is very important to actually set this if you go to 5. Another thing about reasoning in general, and that has been around since the first time of the reasoning model, is you can't really get the reasoning text. OpenAI don't expose them in the API. You can get some kind of summary in the raw API, but that is not exposed in the OpenAI. So as you can see, you can write summary equals auto as they need, and there's no thing back here. If it comes at some point, it could be okay, but it will only be the very small reasoning that you see in the ChatGPT website as well. Another thing that is new in the model is something called verbosity. And that should be able to control. If I say hi, hello, it would just say hi if it's a low verbosity. But if it's a too high, it would go, when I say hello, it will say, hello, how can I help you today, and so on. It's not yet exposed in the APIs. I tried using the extra extension data, but it doesn't really seem to pick it up. So either it's not pushing it along, or we need to wait. You can always do this by just prompt engineering and say, answer back in less than 20 jars. So I don't really think that this is a huge revolution that you can set this, but it's new, so I wanted to mention it. And beyond that, it is very much the same. Everything works the same, and the reasoning token count is already here because of the O models. And as you saw, the 5 model will do exactly the same. So that is actually everything. Out of the box, just change the deployment name, but be aware that temperature is a problem, and reasoning effort by default is medium. So again, if you want to be really cost effective, set it to low, use some of the mini models instead of the high models like I do here. But beyond that, it is quite easy to make the transition to GPT-5. So with that, thank you, and see you in the next one.